Hi everyone. I am Melissa Delaney and I'm with PI Presence and I am excited to have with me today Katie McCoach. Say hi to everyone, Katie.
Hi, happy to be here.
So, Katie actually brings a very special gift to our audience, and what she has done is help people basically like coach them through writing a book. And I think this topic is so fascinating. It's definitely a marketing tool that like is severely underused for a lot of businesses or entrepreneurs. And I just think that Katie is going to bring so much flavor to this topic of things like what to do, what not to do, like red flags and listen to your coach, meet your deadlines, all those fun things. I'll let her cover it. But the most important thing is when you're working with like a lean legal team or if you're a solo attorney, you're often trying to avoid writing because you believe you need like a full manuscript or something meaningful to say. And I get that. Like you really want to make sure like if you are going to put some time and effort into a book, you want to have something important to say. But the truth is that writing is one of the strongest visibility tools that a professional can develop. So let's get into it, Katie. If you wouldn't mind, if you would share a little bit of a background about yourself, I would appreciate hearing more. I mean, you've spent more than a decade helping writers become authors. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, thanks. I'm really glad to be here and talk about this. It's it is something that I think a lot of people haven't spent a lot of time thinking about, like what a book can do for them in their business. And so I'm really excited to be here for that. I have been book coaching and developmental editing, and I'll say more about what that is later. But since 2012, started my own business in 2012. I think I was like 23, and I have been doing that ever since. It's been fabulous, and I work with all kinds of writers. So while today we're going to talk probably more in the business nonfiction world, I work also a lot with fiction authors. So that means writing, creating a whole story, fiction, like fantasy, young adult, women's fiction. I've kind of covered romance, kind of covered a lot of things. But I've also worked with memoirists and people who have written nonfiction books like guides or reference materials.
Sure.
So kind of been doing it all for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. What originally pulled you into being a book coach?
Gosh, I really wanted to be in the book world somehow. I went to school for writing and I was like, I'm going to be a writer. And I am writing. But what I found was in school and then through internships and all these things, I kept realizing I really loved helping. I guess I just like giving advice, right? So I loved giving feedback and then watching someone else do the hard work and bring it together, right? So I liked being the guide and I loved seeing what people did when they had really tailored feedback and then what they ended up producing after that. I just love that, seeing like a whole project come together.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, and if you think about it, you've been doing this for some time and you've probably seen all kinds of authors. Like
Yeah.
they come in all shapes and sizes, right? Especially with different backgrounds. Like maybe they are professionals, maybe they are in the professional services industry and they want to write something that's very specific to what they do, or they have been impacted by something in their personal life that they want to address for perhaps they've adopted a child and then if they want to talk about adopting, right? There's so many different directions these people can go regardless of your background. And you think back to some of those original clients, what patterns are you still seeing today in writers that you can advise all of us about?
Oh gosh. Mainly the pattern is, I think overall what I can see in any genre, any type of topic, is just when someone knows they have something to say, when they let themselves do it, it's really beautiful. Because even if the book, it's not a bestseller, even if it's not everything that, the dream of having a movie and all that, but it's
Sure.
still they published a book, they got it finished, they put it out there, it really seems to do something more to them as a person versus just, oh, I wrote a book, right? Like it kind of changes them. So I've loved seeing that over the years of this pattern of kind of awakening the ability in them to do something, especially because I've worked with a lot of writers who did not study it when they were young, right? So
Sure.
actually, most of the people I work with are like, I've never written in my life. I just decided to try. And I love that because they're just willing to try something new. So I think that's one of the coolest things.
That is very cool. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, are you seeing a pattern in those people who are wanting to try? Is it like
They're a little more
an
picky.
age thing? Like I've come to a part in my life where I want to try something different. Is it they have a specific idea?
Yeah, yes and no. I would say I tend to work with a lot of people who are probably now at this point around my age, like late 30s, and then up to around, gosh, I work with all ages actually. I've got clients who are in their 70s, 80s. So it doesn't stop at any point. I think what's really cool is when I do see people who are like, I'm doing this. I'm doing it. I've decided. And so that decision being already made changes the way they approach everything. Those are
Yeah.
the ones who end up eventually, they will reach a version of their goal, right? Like, so they will get it published or they will realize they just wrote 5 books and how much they've grown. But I do think it's kind of that, I don't know if the pattern is more just kind of a willingness to be new at something and just be like, I'm doing this until I've done enough of it.
Oh, for sure. Like,
It's pretty cool. Yeah.
yeah, that's amazing. And those folks tend to probably find the joy in the writing process more so,
Exactly.
which is probably what you're connecting to, right? Like, especially as a
100%.
coach. When you're a coach in any realm, if you see your student, succeeding or taking your advice and it's working for them, like, obviously that's something to celebrate. But they also probably feel that way, right? Like, oh, I listened to you and I did it and you were right. Like, that's a full circle
I
moment,
mean, it's
right?
nice, right? No, but it's really because it's them being willing to just like keep learning and trying. And so that's how I love when I meet someone, I'm like, oh, I know that they're going to do it. They're going to publish the book. They're going to get it done. Whatever that looks like to them, they're going to reach that goal because you can just tell when someone's just they're in it and knowing that they have a lot to learn. And I think that openness is huge.
Yeah. And everyone talks about writer's block. I mean, everybody who knows about writers like, who decide to write books from their college days for the rest of their life or later in life, what is one way you can help people kind of reconnect with their own voice when they're kind of struggling with where to go next?
Yeah. Writer's block sucks. I don't know anyone who hasn't experienced it. And if anyone really doesn't struggle with it, I find that it is because they have so much joy attached. Um, but I think that it is about kind of coming back to the why. Why are you writing this? And it's coming back to who are you writing it for? And usually it's for ourselves. And I think that when people start to think about who is going to read it versus the fact that they want to write it in the first place and why, that's when they can kind of struggle, right? And we hit blocks for all different reasons, but I do find a lot of it is starting to think about what happens after it's read instead of just focusing on the moment. So if it's a writing block because they're writing the book and they get a little stuck, then I just try to talk them through like getting them back to why they got so excited about writing it in the first place. And
Hmm.
that usually kind of begins to help. Or there's really specific strategies to like try to break it up. And sometimes you just need a break, right? Writing, sometimes
Perspective.
blocks come up because there's something we have to work through. So, yeah, it kind of varies, but if you can find your way back to the reason you're doing something, I think that begins to make a huge difference.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you are struggling with what's next, you could be conflicted on what you think you should say versus what you think the audience reading it should be hearing you say.
Exactly. Exactly. And that actually kind of like leads to a marketing thing, but we could talk about that later or we could
Yeah,
talk
go
about
ahead.
it. But
Jump into it. Yeah.
that we have this fear that comes out in writing a lot of like, who is going to read this? Who's going to see this? And we're trying to make sure it appeals to everyone. And
Hmm.
it doesn't work. And so the more we think about trying to make sure it works for everyone, then we begin to like diminish our voice or we try to make it please others. And this comes down to like even how we are as people, right? If we try to be for everyone, then we're for no one. But I see it a lot in writing, and when someone starts to think about what the response will be or how it's being perceived, then they start moving away from that like really niche approach. And like, this book or this business is for this specific person. Even if you start to tell your business to everyone, it's not going to work, right? And it's like you kind of have to allow people to eliminate themselves from your audience. And it actually leads to the people being like, "Oh, this book was written for me."
Very cool. I
Yeah.
love that. That's a
Yeah.
great perspective. I mean, you're so right. And yeah, being someone to everyone is like a huge cliche, obviously, but we all have to learn that the hard way, especially in personal lives. But when it comes to something you're selling and you want it to be successful, you
Mhm.
want it to appeal to everybody, right? So you can get really hung up on that, incredibly
Yeah.
hung up on that. But the right audience will find you. I mean, we have talked about this before because we had a little check-in call, but explain to me a little bit about what a VIP day is with you when a client
Yeah.
meets with you.
Okay, so the irony in this moment is that I said all that, and then I sometimes still struggle, like, oh, but I want my services to be for everyone, right? So
Sure.
I recognize that. But so my VIP days is an example where I could say I'd do anything in a VIP day. What I really do try to do is that's a day where I'll spend with an author like 10 a.m. until 4. And so it's like 6 hours on Zoom. And usually it's to like create the plan for the book. So someone might come to me and say, I want to write this. I don't know where to begin. I don't even know like what's my path forward. And now this helps for a lot of people who are like really love outlines and planning and knowing where they're going. So then we just kind of it's like a brainstorming day, right? Well, we will just dig into every element of that book, story, the goal for the book. But then it can lead to other things too, right? We can just create a plan for more of their career steps. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's weird because I'll end the day after like 6.5 hours, and I'm like, oh, I could just work again for a whole nother day because it's just so energizing. I mean, it's exhausting, but it's energizing because wow, we just to deep dive and to have no interruptions and just like go as hard as you can into this thing you just want to do. It's so fun. And I love being part of that and then watching someone else do the harder work, which is write it.
Right, of course. You're not heavy lifting that component.
Right.
You're giving them the roadmap. So that's nice.
But with that being said, like a lot of times that's the hard part for them is the roadmap, right?
Right,
Once
right.
they have that, they're like, oh, I'm good. I can go write this easily. So that's really exciting to see.
Yeah, and I think, if somebody has a really good idea and they don't know where to start and they come to you, what they probably already know and realize, because it's very easy to Google this, is that you can either go through traditional publishing routes, which is probably a little more difficult. I'm going to assume that. I don't know the answer to that, or self-publishing. And I'm curious how you guide them through that path, even if it's like a 50,000 foot level, not the full
Yeah.
VIP day path.
Right. No, that's something that I talk about with all my authors. And usually the first time I get on a call with them, I try to see if they already have an idea what they want. At least when they project and they think about what they want this book to look like later on, because then I can kind of get a sense of what strategies we might have to enact. But um, I'm gonna back up a little. So when I talk to a writer, so let me traditional and self-publishing, right? Traditional is when you go to a publishing house. A lot of times the steps, and I'll try to keep it brief, is you pitch an agent, the agent decides to represent you, and then they are putting your book out on submission to get an acquiring editor at a publishing house to take the book on.
Got it.
And so, and just for reference, you don't pay agents. The agents make money when your book is picked up.
When you're published and making money.
And then the publishing house takes charge, right? Obviously it's your book, you have say, but they're going to make a lot of the decisions for you. They're going to hire the whole team. They are fronting the costs, right? If you self-publish, you're completely in control. And that's something that I think a lot of people don't recognize that some people really want to hold that control, which means they want to have exactly the book the way they want it, edited the way they want, the cover to look the way they want, right? And
Hmm.
then of course, then they get to have full royalties for the most part, right?
Right.
But then they have to front the costs. So I've noticed a lot of times it comes to what level of control are you willing to give up? And then it's kind of picking between two hard things, right? Because it's going to
Right.
be hard either way. And a lot of writers think maybe if I traditionally publish, more will be done on my behalf, which is not. it's not true these days. I mean,
Really?
they will help with distribution, maybe a little marketing, but it's still the marketing still comes down to everyone, which is really hard
So
for
anyone who has buy-in, so like your agent, your publisher, and yourself, essentially.
the agent's going to do a little, but it's really going to be the marketing is going to still land on the author for the most part, unless you get the biggest deal ever. But like that's going to take a few books or your first one blowing up, in a good way.
Right.
Um, yeah, so that's where I think people have to decide what they want in the end.
Right.
The team behind them, do they want to control the team? They get to pick everyone, so self-publishing, or do they want to let someone else make those decisions?
Yeah.
You know?
And you see all these funny if you check out of your day-to-day life looking at TikTok videos like I do sometimes. It is also a very different world out there than traditional publishing routes. Like there are people who are on TikTok constantly about their books or having other people talk about their books, right? This like viral marketing or organic marketing, whatever you want to call it. On top of that, you have these social media PR houses that would be like another vendor component to a potential either path, right? Either self-publishing or regular traditional publishing, right? Like is that also something that comes into play? Like I see this, but it doesn't mean I know anything about it.
No,
I
you
see
probably, yeah.
these organizations who are like they wrote this cookbook. I'm making up this hybrid or hypothetical situation. They wrote this cookbook. We now are going to viral market the heck out of this on all the social media channels. We're going to put you in all these bookstores all over the country, signing books and meeting people and shaking hands and kissing babies. Like that is a whole different arm of marketing, but the beneficiary of that is either the author and the publisher or and the agent, right? So there could be some component of that that I think might be like relationship based. Like, is that because that's a big part of legal marketing for our lawyers and for law firms, that community kind of marketing. And I'm curious if that's also kind of the same for books.
100%, yeah.
Okay.
And I think that, and to your point, with a traditional house, they're going to have more of those connections, right? It's going to be slightly depending on where you rank as an author, right? Sometimes new authors, it's harder. They have to kind of earn to a certain point where then the publisher will be like, okay, we're going to put you in all these Barnes and Nobles, right? We're going to put you in the airports. That
Yeah.
takes a certain like you kind of a lot of times you have to work your way up unless there's just this debut that's just they decide to put a lot behind it because they think it'll pay off, right? And the thing about traditional houses is usually keeping in mind that they're usually a little risk shy. So that's another thing that can help. If you're self-publishing and you're like, this is a little risky or this is really niche, might be a little better for self-publishing because traditionals are like, well, we're going to put this much money behind it and see how it goes, right? And it is about money there.
Yeah.
But oh my gosh, my brain just stopped. But what did you had just asked a more specific question though.
No, it's like from a relationship
Oh,
standpoint, like
yes. Okay.
is the relationship component because if you come in and self-publish,
Hmm.
you have no relationships because you're
Yeah.
just starting out, right? And here I have Katie and she's helping and she's advising me like what are relationships that you always recommend and like do you come with relationships or does somebody else come with relationships? And like I'm sure you've networked in this space and not everyone who's a writing coach knows a million other writing coaches, but they might know agents, they might know publishers. They might be like, I know the perfect children's book editor on the planet, or I've met this illustrator and they're amazing, right? All the little components you kind of don't think about. Is that something that you see being so super critical on either side of the publishing aisles?
Yeah, definitely. That I think anyone can craft those and I think sometimes authors tend to feel as though it's up to they'll put it out there and just see what happens.
Mhm.
And however they go through the publishing. And they forget how much that they can control. And to the relationship point, I have heard over and over that the authors who make relationships with, for example, book talk, like bloggers or people who are, they used to be bloggers, right? Now it's all book talk, but anyone who reviews books and like has a big book, oh man, just fan base, I guess. Um,
Hmm.
when you start making like relationships with those people before you publish, you have a better chance of being part of their world, right? And they will want to work with you. But that's a give and take relationship. Obviously, you want to be contributing, not just, hey, I'm making friends with you because later I hope it pays off. Like
Right.
really a real relationship. And I've noticed that those are the ones that just soar because it's human based, right? And so same with bookstores. Like I think a lot of authors forget you could be make relationships with your local bookstores. And then when you publish, they're going to be so excited to say, put you in the local section or something. And then
Sure.
maybe they're more likely to have a signing with you. And if you make relationships with other authors, again, this is either path, but you guys can do joint things together. So
Hmm.
in my world, a lot of editors or other coaches, we will connect and we'll do marketing things together where we cross promote together and have little events. And writers do that all the time. And those things make such a huge difference. So while a traditional house would have certain relationships that are more business based, like connections with bookstores to get your book out there, those other relationships are going to still be something that if you can continue to foster them, that's going to pay off so much more.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense.
Mm.
And it's kind of funny, like this is only coming to mind because it's probably one of the biggest book series on the planet, but if you've never heard of Harry Potter, you're probably living under a rock, right? So we've talked about like concept to market, right? You have this idea and now we're publishing and we've gone one of two paths, traditional publishing or self-publishing. What makes something become a Harry Potter series? Like, what's the thing that like is it the agent who spies it early? Is it the publishing house who marketed it and didn't realize it was a gem and then it was an accident? Like,
I do think, yeah, I think it's a lot of accidents sometimes because I've seen so many times where I've witnessed people that I know who have gotten published, um, and they get a publishing deal with a publishing house. It's one of the bigger ones, and I've seen all the money and the promotion the house put behind it. And then the book it does okay, but it's not like it didn't go the way they thought it would,
sure.
right? And so I think that sometimes they're making a bet. They think this will pay off. And then the market dictates. Like it's the people who's reading it, right? So as much as something can be pushed in front of someone, if it doesn't totally land, it just doesn't totally, or it's not the right timing. So with the thing like Harry Potter, that I think that was a no one could have predicted that. No
Right.
one, because even like the first book is like it's a weird who's the audience? Is it for middle grade? Is it for older kids? It's longer than most books, but then now they're so long. But the first one was a very
Very
standard,
normal.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's just like one of those kind of flukes because I know that J.K. Rowling was rejected several times, but
Right.
it's not like the first agent was like, "This is a gem." Um,
Sure.
and then you have things like A Court of Thorn and Roses series is huge right now, and it still is huge, and it has been over the past few years, but that's been around for a while. Some things just take longer, right? Or it just becomes, oh, this is what works for the stage, and you just never know. I
Sure.
will say that I work a lot in the romance world, and there is an interesting thing that romance readers are romance readers, and they will keep reading romance and they will find more and more and more. And so if you happen to have anyone who's like, I also want to write a romance on the side, they tend to do better in self-publishing actually, because the readers really like it when things are really specific or a little weird or a little dark. And the readers really dictate the trends. And that one's interesting because they just never stop. So it's actually a huge market. I don't think enough people recognize romance is like
That's
where
wild.
money is a lot of times. Um, but it is, but then all the others, it's so hard. It's just kind of, you just cannot predict it really.
So if you're writing a technical book, you can hit that niche weird audience, right?
Right. Yeah. The other thing too is like, obviously with memoirs and anything that is like self-help or nonfiction, you're going to have a better chance if you have certain credentials already, right? So celebrities, they're like, they know they'll make money off of that book, right? And so that same thing kind of applies if there's certain, like, if you had exposure for some reason. So in this world, for you guys, maybe if there was a case that was big and then that lawyer went on to write a book, especially if there was, I have no idea if you could ever even write any sort of expose thing, but like, if there was anything that just even they wrote something and it shared their expertise or their experience, they're going to have a little more likelihood that a publisher might be like, okay, we'll put money behind this, right? Or we'll give it a shot. Um, versus if they don't have that sort of already audience built in, which is fine
Mhm.
because that's what you're building, right? You're using the book
Right.
to build an audience versus the book works because of the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that makes sense. I mean, it it's funny because in the legal space, I feel like self-publishing makes a lot more sense for attorneys, right? Unless they're writing, a technical item that would be under like a law review or something to that effect.
Right.
So,
Right.
that would probably go under like a Thomson Reuters and then they would help publish or any of those items. But some law firms like to build like a 2025 in review about all the case law changes, right? So that people understand for future generations of whoever practices like workers' comp, like these are all the things that changed in California at that time. So now we have to do another book. So while that's not necessarily for the masses, it is technical information that would be beneficial to other law firms to have in their office so that they could reference it, right? So there's all
Yeah.
kinds of random different ways and reasons, like you said in the beginning, for the audience members to get the information that they need. Just like everything else on the internet, any blog, any social media channel, whatever your algorithm is pushing at you today.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah, that's interesting. Now, what's kind of like a normal timeline, or is there a normal timeline for idea concept publish? Like, especially like maybe more from the self-publishing standpoint?
Self-publishing, that's the other thing that's great about self-publishing is that you're in control, right? And so the pace of when you get your book out there is kind of more up to you or the people you hire and work with. Um, but I would say, I mean, it's hard to say the concept to like, but because it depends however long
Sure.
someone takes
I'm
to
sure there's
draft.
variables
Yeah.
across the board. Yeah.
But if someone's pretty quick, it's maybe it's fairly short, you know, if it is like here's some information, it's that gives me a sense of that would probably be fairly short, right? That's not going to be a novel length book. And so I would at least, you know, probably a couple months to draft it. And then once you get to a point like, you know, you want to go through it a couple times, but then when you want to edit, you know, before you get to the stage where you edit, just make sure that's the version. You're like, okay, I don't think I'm going to change much else. You might want to work with, depending on what this is, right? If it's very technical based, then this is going to be something you're going to want people in that space to review before then you send it to editing. But if it's more like it's maybe more case studies that are kind of showing examples or have a little more like emotional aspect, or if there's a narrative behind it, then that is gonna, you're gonna want someone a little more like a book coach or someone who, or readers who would be the people who would read it, right? You can reach out and say, hey, this seems like something you might read. Would you give me some feedback before it's published, right? So then they can kind of tailor it if they want. And then, but then when you get to the point where you're ready to edit, my one thing that I always recommend, there's so many types of editing and I can discuss those, but I can go,
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up because that's going to be my
yeah.
next question. So go
Well,
have at it.
so I'll go for it real quick. So developmental editing is more structural. That's going to be the stuff where it's like big picture, how does this read? Are we getting everything we need? Is someone going to stop reading at some point and why? And then trying to work with it. So a lot of times my work is developmental editing and coaching. Essentially, I see it as I'm helping the writer. I'm translating what the reader would pick up, and then I also know what the writer's trying to say, but I can kind of say, oh, I see you're trying to do this, but this is what your reader's going to receive. So how do we work this, right? And then we can figure out how to make sure the reader is getting as close to the message as possible that the writer wants them to get. Um, and obviously that varies. Maybe a little easier if it's not with
Right.
fiction or cramming with characters, but it still
Right.
happens, and you still want to make sure that people want like to keep reading. So depending on your audience, right? And now then there's line editing, which is going to be like, is this essentially the question of is this well written, right? Are the
Hmm.
How is this like this is more line for line? Is this the best way to say it? Is it the tightest way to say it? Is this hitting the point? Are you rambling? Like that's where we're going to look at that. And then copy editing is going to be consistency, somewhat fact checking. But that's really where you do errors, typos, things like that. Anything that you catch that's like, oh, that is literally wrong. That's a typo. That's the punctuation's a little off. So I always say that if you could only choose one, because they all cost a good chunk of change, right? I would say on average, each level could be probably on average 1 to 2 grand. So
Wow.
just depends on the length of the book too. That's part of it. A lot of editors charge by word. So if it's a shorter book, it's not going to cost as much. So that's something to keep in mind. But if you decide I'm going to self-publish, I can only do one level editing, do copy editing. Like because that's when readers will go, there were a million errors in this book and it really distracted me. How can I see you as credible? Especially in this world for you guys. That would come out really big. If a lawyer put out a book that was filled with typos and punctuation errors, it would lose credibility pretty fast, right?
Right.
And that's the
Absolutely.
level that shows professionalism, overall. So if you had to pick one, the others you can get feedback for free, but if you had to pick one, definitely make sure you copy edit your book before you publish it.
Yeah, I mean, and you think about feedback from like a lot of organizations are doing 360 feedback back loops based on their actual job performance. So this is kind of a very similar task. It's just related to the output book that you're writing or whatever you want to call it. Let's not call it a book. It's a Word document at this point. Whatever it is.
Yeah.
But if you're if you're getting tons of feedback or if you have someone like you like a coach and you're doing the developmental editing and you're like, okay, now I got a foot for some editing because I'm getting close to self-publishing and I just want to make sure it's all buttoned up. Like, when is feedback becoming like a growth tool for the writer and when does it kind of derail them? And have you seen that?
Yeah. Oh, that's huge. Yeah, I've seen that so many times because a lot of people do get stuck in that. Well, I can always make it better because yeah, literally anything can always keep being changed. And if you look at it from a year from now, it's going to be something you're like, I wish I had done all this different. We have to remember, and I have to tell myself this all the time, to be honest, that what we have this fear once it's published, it's there forever. It's like, yes, but that was a point in time. That was information you had at that point in time. At some point, you have to let it go, or it's not helping anyone. So, if
Sure.
this is something that's going to help other lawyers or it's going to help clients, you have to be willing to say it might not be perfect. It is still very useful.
Sure.
And I think what happens, a lot of people will they'll maybe get feedback from too many people, which is something that happens where they'll ask for feedback from a lot of people. And then I've always noticed, um, if someone's struggling with their own vision a little bit, like if they start to get in their head, about what they're writing, then when they get feedback, they tend to go, oh, I have to change all of it to match what people are saying. And then it really loses its like where they were going, right? Because now
Spiral,
this
yeah.
is not, yeah, they start to really, uh, it's tragic because it's happened to me. I've done it myself where I'm like, wait a minute, after I changed it for everyone else's feedback, I'm like, that's not what I wanted to write. Why did I do that? So I do think that sometimes, especially if someone wants to write a lot, you kind of go through that stage at some point. So just being aware that it might happen where you start to forget your voice. But that's one of the reasons I really like working with authors is because I'm able to say, hey, I see what you're trying to do. This feedback is trying to say this feedback's saying this, and I help them like parse it through and figure out what clicks for them and how to do it that works for them. But if you don't have a coach to work with, I mean, obviously you can do this on your own, but it's a little hard. You have to really listen to yourself.
Yeah.
So, my one rule of thumb, just very practical way to look at feedback. If you send it and say you send it to 3 to 5 people, and I would say if you get 3 pieces of feedback on the same thing, then it needs to change, right? Or it needs to be looked at least, right? But
There's
if
a consistent
exactly.
consensus saying that this is an issue. Yeah.
Exactly. So then you know, okay, there's something here, whether it's the thing is sometimes when people go, "Oh, well, I'll change it to what they say." It's like, "Wait a minute, figure out what you're trying to do and why it's not connecting." That's when you can really utilize feedback. But at some point you do have to reach a point and say, "Okay, it's I'm done," or "This is as good as it's going to get," or "I've done enough." Like, I don't want to, if I change more, I will lose the point. Then
Hmm.
it's time to step away.
Oh, 100%. I mean, what your role is, you're almost like the mediator
Yeah.
in that
In a
conversation,
way, yeah.
right? Yeah, like you're taking information from all the sides
Yeah.
and saying, hold on, you may be interpreting this feedback as a change, but what it's really saying is maybe there's somewhere else you can like add that information in the book because it comes earlier and they don't have to figure it out, right? Like what because you're so deeply into the developmental component of it, you kind of already have that big picture. And then they can still say it in their voice while taking that feedback, and it probably solves the problem. Like you're the problem solver mediator in this situation. I love that. That's a great way to like interpret it. Yeah.
I'll take. No, it is because it is the thing that I really work hard doing specifically because now I've done it for a while is I really listen to what the author is trying to do, right?
Mhm.
And it's important to keep in mind when you get feedback, especially from people who are just their friends or family or readers, they're not looking at it like, I see what you're trying to do. They're just looking at it like, I didn't like this, right? Like they'll just give very, very straightforward feedback. They'll say, I didn't like it, or they'll say they like it and not give you any specifics. And
Mhm.
so a lot of times, yeah, I'm translating the feedback or I'm able to keep what the author's trying to do in mind and I'm not putting my vision on them. I'm saying, I see yours. Here's how I reach it.
Yeah, that's very cool. I love that. Wow. I mean, something that we in the legal industry are dealing with, especially from like a task-oriented standpoint or you know, process improvement is AI is such a big hot topic, and I don't want to get too deep into the woods on this because we have a whole another episode that we talk about AI as related to marketing. But from a writing standpoint, I mean, you could so easily pop into any AI machine, write me this book in my voice, right? If you've taught it. And I'm curious if you've been thinking about this. Is there, and I'm going to say this delicately, where does AI help, if at all? And where does it weaken the creative process? Because what I just suggested is such a bad idea.
But it's still, it is
But
happening.
people are doing it. So,
Yeah.
like, what's some advice there for our audience?
I'm, uh, I obviously can tell I have so many feelings about AI. I've realized, I recently, it's more that the generative AI, it's the AI that you say, hey, create this for me, say an image or a book, but it's being pulled from all previous sources that exist that most likely didn't have approval to be part of it, right? So
Right.
in the writing world, I'm going to quickly give my one thing. Um, it's harmful to writers in many ways because there are even lawsuits and there's things going on right now because and I think I just saw that California is signing something into effect to protect writers from their work being put into it without their approval. So now I think it's being included in contracts. It didn't used to be something that had to be thought about before, right? Um, and so now there's that layer, which is like to me it's just more it's a little inauthentic, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I think in the world of if you're writing a book, that is the goal is to show your credibility. That's where I struggle because then it's like but then I see the benefits of how it helps. The thing is, yeah, trying to have something, putting in your voice and putting in some of your stuff, like I mean, sometimes it's shocking the stuff that comes back because you are like, wow, this is really sounds really great. There is still something that I think people feel internally, whether everyone can hear it or not, of like, that doesn't feel like authentic, right? So there's that layer. I do think it can help with more of the big picture things. So if you're like, I'm trying to figure out um, maybe getting ideas on topics, right? For blog posts or for something, for structuring, for outlining, maybe even putting your stuff in and saying, can you organize this in a different way? Like there are certain things that can help. I've also know that there are writers I've worked with who this is going to be something for fiction, but I wonder if there's a way this gives an idea. But I've seen writers take their descriptions of their character and then put it in AI and say, can you create an image? And not that they're using it, but they're seeing what comes back. And I think that's a really interesting way to kind of get a feedback loop of like, when you describe a character, how well did you do it? Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Setting
Like,
stuff
is
like
this
that.
what I was envisioning?
Yeah.
And if it's
Yep.
coming back totally wrong, your description's off.
Yeah. So like there's different ways and everyone has different reasons, I think, that they would use AI. If it's, I think the biggest thing is if you're letting AI make decisions for you is when that becomes a struggle.
Mhm.
And again, this kind of goes back to why I like to coach, because I'm able to see what someone's trying to do. And if I don't know, then I'm going to keep asking questions. I'm going to figure out why they are doing this, what the point is, where they're trying to go with this, to make sure I'm always honoring their vision. And
Mhm.
that's not something you're going to be able to get from AI feedback, right? It can help to a point to see, like, oh, does this work for me or not? Um, but some of that feedback is going to it's just going to be different, right? And then, of course, there's just, I don't know. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. It
You,
does. And it's,
yeah,
I think your advice is wise. I mean, use it for a gut check.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
kind of it. I mean, uh, don't put so much stock into it being your writer and then you edit. Like, no,
right.
you're not an editor. You actually are going to still have to hire an editor at some point. So,
Right. Like, and sometimes you can put stuff in and try to get a sense of like, what is this saying? Or is there a different way to say it? And I think that that can help give ideas when you're stuck,
mhm,
especially going back to writer's block. Sometimes that can help, or is there something missing here? But I just know that also with AI, because of especially like ChatGPT, because the updates are so constant and different every time, it's just hard um, to give away all to utilize it so much that you might lose your voice, you might lose the
yeah,
point, you might
yeah.
lose the plot, and I mean that in always, you know.
And even, I mean, ChatGPT, there's some corporate versions of it that you can pay for, and you can actually teach it to speak your language, like taking
Wow.
your prompts, taking the way you've spoken to it, and use your voice, which is terrifying, but also it's not generating what you probably originally were trying to say. It's just it thinks it's talking like you because of how you've talked to it.
Mhm.
And if you have ever seen any of my prompts to ChatGPT, it is incredibly casual. And if I'm writing something that's very, you know, poignant,
Right.
that would be a very opposite tone. So
Mhm.
you have to be very, very careful, even if you're trying to teach ChatGPT something.
Yeah, I
About
agree. I
yeah.
think overall it can help with like generating ideas and getting you moving when you get a little stuck and kind of a gut check. But as it comes to actual writing, I would encourage against it. Especially to publish because you just also you don't know what could come back later. If it finds out that you published a book that was, mostly AI, I don't know the ramifications for that. That feels like that could come back to bite you in the ass later. Just pardon my
Sure.
language.
And you know, when will the industry get to a place where they're checking that before they even start reviewing manuscripts or, pitched ideas? At some point that's got to come up, or if it hasn't already, let's run this through and make sure it's not plagiarized completely. I mean, they would do that when I was in college, and that was before we had technology. So It's plagiarism was huge, and so now instead of it being plagiarism, it's AI, which is essentially plagiarism from everywhere else.
It is so wild. I think just knowing too in the writing world, as a creative, there's a lot of pushback. There's a lot of struggle for creatives, artists, writers in that world. So that's where I also just I caution because I want if someone's going to publish a book, I want them to feel like they are able to represent themselves as I published a book, right? I'm an author. I did this and if there's something that could kind of stand in your way from people seeing you as credible, that's where I would caution.
Yeah. That's that brings me to an interesting question that's a little off topic, but if someone is kind of shopping their concept idea that's kind of already written, let's put it that way, or the framework is there and it's a long series concept. If you're shopping it, do you recommend putting like watermarks, like copywritten or property of, so there's no theft of concept or idea? Or is that not traditionally done in these circles?
It's interesting because it's not traditionally been a thing, but so like when there have been times where writers will send something to me and they might ask me to sign an NDA or they might post something with a watermark or something. Um, but that doesn't happen that often because to be honest, it gets in our way a little bit, right? So if you are pitching your book to agents to try to get them to represent you, or if you're just sending it straight, there are publishing houses where you can send straight to them. They're not going to go through the extra loop of signing anything, right? And so you are creating a barrier for yourself. So there's that, and it's just not been traditionally part of the publishing landscape. Again, I would lose my job, right? People wouldn't hire me if I was always giving everything out or if I was using people's stuff. So that would end me really fast. So I think there is that layer of trust, but now again, it's a little different with AI. So um, I think there are times where it could be worth having some protections in place. But when you are trying to, especially to get a publishing deal, you're likely not going to get too far if you put too many barriers in front of someone working with you.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a little
Yeah.
tricky.
Yeah. Now, this is going to be dependent on a lot of factors, I realize. But what can an individual, expect to invest in themselves for this creative project? Let's call it a creative project to start. Before it becomes an asset, how much could they reasonably expect to put out of pocket to get from concept to something in their hands?
Oh gosh, it varies, right? I think there are
I'm
people,
sure.
right? There are people who could do it without any spending at all, I'm sure. But if you are like, I want to go through this as maybe as fast as possible as like one path instead of I've noticed when people try to do this without spending money, that means they are basically they're going on a journey to take on all the information and figure it out themselves. So it tends to lead to a lot of several paths that don't pan out, right? Versus hiring someone early on. Um, I mean, if I work with someone early on, then I can say, what are you trying to do? And now I can guide them towards that goal, right? And I can help them filter out the crap they don't need that would send them off path. So there's the benefit of that, right? It could end up saving you so much time and energy. So you're not distracted in different paths, but it costs more money. Um, but I don't know. It is really hard to know. I would say at least a couple of $1,000. If you're working just, it depends. It depends if you want to do this all on your own or if you want help, right? So if someone worked with me, they'd probably end up spending a couple grand. Um, or if they with me for a long time, it might be a little more than that. But then if someone continue to work with people, right? Or they hire out for the editing because they're going to self-publish, then again, that's going to keep costing a little bit. But say you just work with one book coach and you're really good at doing all this on your own, outside of that, because you just have the guidance, that's all you need, then it's not going to, hopefully it wouldn't flip you upside down. I think it's the decision to, a lot of people think, oh, well, will this pay off? Is there a return on investment, right? When I get the book published, will I get this money back? And I really recommend not looking at it that way, unfortunately, because there is no guarantee, right? Once the book's published, there's no guarantee what'll happen with it. It is, that's why I really make sure when I talk to someone, why are they doing this? Because if it's just to make money, then there are different ways. There might be different paths, there are different ideas. Um, my direction might be a little different because if it's for other reasons, I want to build my credibility. I want this to be my stepping stone to get clients to look at my stuff and be like, oh, this is really a client building thing, right? This is something I put as a lead magnet in my newsletter that pulls people into, that's going to be different, right? So then you want to put your best foot forward. So it will cost you more upfront, but then it'll lead to a different set of return on investment later, right? So
Right.
it's,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I've seen attorneys even themselves, because if they've marketed themselves for 20 years, write a legal marketing book, which is great. And I think that's so important for the rest of the industry to, learn from someone who's done it and what they did and where their mistakes were. That's always helpful. But if a book is, the end goal of that one is they're not being hired by other attorneys. They're just offering advice, right? So that's actually a dollar amount return that they're looking for from that book. But like if their end goal is the credibility, the clients, other speaking, keynote speaking, a growth in their business,
Yeah.
how should authors think about marketing their book, do you think?
I think that's about credibility and pulling people in, right? And showing that you know what you're talking about, that you can talk about it in so many different ways. It's not just the book, it's that you can speak on this on podcasts. And right, that's the other cool thing about books is that then you can start reaching out to podcasts and get interviews, and it helps to have something to direct people to.
Right.
Right now, here I am, I'm talking to you, and what am I gonna, I'm gonna direct you maybe to my website, right? But if I had a book, which, the irony, again, not lost on me that I haven't done it
Right.
myself. But I know, like, I have this content that I'm like, oh, I just need to put this into a book, right? And I know the steps involved. So if I had a book that I could say, oh, go buy this book, it's also such a small, quick investment for someone to say, oh, let me go spend $5 to $10, see if I like what they say, and then they come around later, right?
Mhm.
And it does help with talks, right? Events. If you were speaking, it's so nice to send someone to your book, and then that begins to pull them into your world, right?
Right.
Those,
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, I'm
Yeah.
always pushing, especially from a marketing standpoint, whether it's on your website, on your Yelp reviews, on wherever you are publishing, right? You want to be approachable, but think about all of the teachable moments you have repeated over your career over and over and over again. How can we make that message something you don't have to repeat over and over and over again?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Right? It's
Yep.
it's it's
Yeah.
like those performers who sing the same song over again and they're like, I can't do it anymore. I can't sing this song anymore.
It's so true. I used to, part of my work, I would write like basically book reports, right? So I would write notes. So that would be originally how I started. I would get a book and then I would write about 10 to 15 pages of notes. But then I kept repeating the same things. Finally, I just took all the stuff I used to say and I put it into a document. And then I was like, here, this is supplemental. So here's our work. Go look at this later. I'm going to direct you to where to like look, but this is advice that I keep repeating. So again, like that could just easily be a lead magnet that I put in my newsletter and I give away for free, or I give away for a few bucks or something.
Right.
And then people invest, right? And then they say, oh, she knows what she's talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, I mean, and how do you advise people? I mean, or do you advise people on what they should charge for their book, depending on size, how it's published, where it's published? Is that something you offer or not really?
I mean, not so much. But I can give some thought. So obviously you want to consider what's an easy decision. I do think that's a really big thing. If you have a book, make it a really easy decision for someone to buy. Um, I personally don't really think under $4. I would keep it like five and up. I think it depends if it's really big or if is information. Sometimes people sell a book or maybe a PDF or something. It's like $37, but it's this that's the way they sell the content online. Like this is like your solution, right? So if
Hmm.
it's very solution based, then I think you can charge a little more. If it's like this is giving you examples or it's showing you how I work, then it's a little different. But if you were to go put your book on Amazon, right? Then you're going to want to stay within what the market's dictating. So I would look at other books in that world. I mean, Amazon has its own algorithm, right? So you lean into that, look at what books are being listed, which ones are the top ones in your subcategory, and just see what comes up and what they're charging. But I would say usually between like $5 to $12.
Yeah, okay. That's great. And then I'm glad you brought up Amazon because I know that there is a pathway to, if you are self-publishing and you don't want to go print a
Hmm.
thousand books yourself, you can be on Amazon and as ordered, they print and ship. So it's not like sitting and waiting. Is that a route you recommend people, or is that just kind of
I think it really
putting here?
depends. I think that can work really well for I think in this world, like if for maybe more nonfiction, something that maybe is not going to be necessarily, you're not thinking, oh, this is going to be bought all the time. But I would say, like, if you're writing fiction and especially like it matters how it looks, then maybe I would lean against that, right? Because the look of the book holding in your hands, that might make a huge difference depending on the content and the experience you want the reader to have. I
Yeah,
think if it's technical information, you can get away in a way with a little more of like if the book prints and it's a little wonky, it's not going to lose your credibility completely.
right.
And right, it's tough. I mean, print on demand is great, but then again, it's because it saves you money. You don't have to go spend a ton, buy a bunch of books that just you're like, cool, they're just sitting here. What do I do?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I've also seen, especially dabbling in the legal world, there have been these vendors that say, hire us, we will write your book for you, publish it, and send it out. Any red flag scenario recommendations for some of those vendors?
I mean, the nice thing is that you guys are probably going to be better at looking at contracts and being aware of the red flags there, right? Um,
Absolutely.
but there's so many different types of publishing. There's hybrid too, where it's maybe you do whether they write the book for you or you write the book and then they do all the work, but then it's still not you pay them and then they like there are somewhere it's basically an agency. It's like you pay them to publish the book, but you're still self-publishing. So
Hmm.
in those cases, that might be something that you decide is better use of your money. You don't have to go find every person yourself, but just make sure that you consider what are the royalties, what are they keeping, and some of the things that are big red flags or things to consider is especially if you tend to want to write more, looking at what their terms are. One of them is like the first right of refusal. So some places you'll sign with someone and then they'll say, we have the first anything you write, we get to say if we want it or not.
Interesting.
But then you got to be careful. Okay, so which is normal in traditional publishing, but you do have to consider, okay, well, at what point can you go take it to yourself? Like if they say no, are you not able to write it, or can you go publish it on your own, right? Or send it to another publisher. So
Right.
just looking
Get
at
more
that.
explicit details of what that
Yeah.
means. Yeah.
And then also obviously like royalties and copyright, just making sure that those things um, favor you ultimately. You're the writer, so don't give away your intellectual property.
Amazing. Now, as a coach, I want to come back to you and everything that you do. What transformations do you see most often when you're helping someone from start to finish?
Um, I think it's overall, it's like the confidence is really fun to see, right? When I see someone work on something, they're like they're really passionate about it. They really want to do it, but a lot of times people hire me and they're like, I haven't told anyone about this, right? Like, and I think it's so cool that they've reached a point where they're willing to work with someone because that is like they've made the commitment in a way, like I'm doing this. And I
Right.
think that's a huge step. And then once they say that, then they realize, oh, other people will have to read it, right? And so it's really fun to be part of the process where I can see their confidence grow in that Yeah, we're working together and I'm going to give them feedback and there are things to change. And yeah, you have more work to do, but they never feel like they can't, right? That's the best part is that I get to help them believe that they can do it. I show them, like, here are ways you can do it. And one of my favorite things is when I give feedback. And then someone comes around and they send me the book again, and I read it again. I'm like, oh my God, they took what we talked about and they made it like 10 times better. Like, that is even more than I could have pictured. Like, they really expanded on this idea, and it's so fun to see the book develop and them at the same time.
Right.
It's very cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, final question.
Sure.
What do you wish, talk about teachable moments.
Mm.
What do you wish more writers understood before they reach out to a coach?
Oh boy. Um, oh gosh. I don't know if I can even just say one thing. I think overall, oh man, this is a tricky one. I don't know why this is so tricky. I think it's because there's so many things that are running through my head. One thing I wish they understood is that I, the right coach for you or editor, whoever, is trying to help you. If you do start to feel like someone's pushing you in a way that you don't agree with, then you got to look at it. Is it because you think they're pushing their thoughts on you, or are you not open to recognizing that they're trying to help you? So it is tricky, right? Working with writers, these a lot of times they do feel like these are their babies. They care so deeply. They're so connected to it. And even when it's technical, there's still a lot of like, but this is me in here. Um, and so sometimes they can get feedback and feel like you're trying to change what I'm doing. And I encourage them to be open. I want you to stand strong, but I also want you to recognize that the goal is always to help you. And it's not that you need to do what I say, but I'm trying to help you see what you need to make this the best it can be, right? Because my goal is to help you feel so good about what you end up, the final product. So I think just being open, and willing to learn and yeah. I think I'll stop there. Yeah.
No, that's perfect. I mean, the truth is that writing is probably one of the biggest visibility tools any, especially a service professional can develop. So I feel like you've given us a lot of amazing factoids, especially people who have no idea where to start. I feel like this is a very underutilized skill set to have in our toolbox for the legal industry. So thank you so much. I mean, I think that as an authority yourself in this space, like your work can help any writer or attorney build a foundation with intent. So thank you. I really appreciate your time for
Thank you.
visiting us. And everyone, thank Katie and visit her website and check her out. And we will come back with our next episode very soon. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to have been here.